And the people who murdered them get off scot-free, or basically no sentence at all. It's a slap on the wrist. And so again, I encourage you to go just beyond what you see on the ordinary. There's usually a backstory to everything, and it's extremely important. And so again, the theme to this conference is family. And when I do my show and I do talks like this, I'm talking to the people who are not able to come out in whatever capacity, whether they are afraid that they will lose their family, their friends, their employment, their voice. Because there are some activists that are out there that work closely with the church, but if they even hint at identifying with a secular person, they're kicked out. And so they have a voice, but it's been silenced. And so again, I'll give an example. Dr. Anthea Butler, who's a professor at the University of Penn, and we've adopted her as Auntie Anthea. She doesn't realize she has all these nieces and nephews, but she does. And that's what I'm talking about, the family that you don't even know. Because I know there are people who listen to what I say and watch what I'm doing, and they're influenced. And so I look at them as my nieces and nephews, look at them as young people that need some instruction. And that brings us back to the young people from Parkland, because with the technology and the innovation that is out here and all the work that a lot of these Black and brown activists have put out there, those children were learning. And I think it's important for you all to understand that, because how would they know about intersectionality? I don't think that's taught in high school. How would they know about white supremacy and capitalism and wealth inequality? That was not in any of the books that I read when I was in high school. So they are learning. You have people that rail against the technology, and it's been helping us to educate people around the world. It's also enabled us to basically have relationships and build a rapport with people who thought that they were alone. I was one of those people. I thought that it was something wrong with me because I didn't believe what my family believed or what some of my friends believed. And as we found each other as a community, 2010 on Facebook, it just exploded. And we started finding one another. And so we started building out our different communities. And we're out here doing some good work. And that's why I leave the archives up, because I want people to go back and find it. 50, 60 years from now when I'm gone, I want them to go back and find it. And secretly, I've had some family members come out and say, yeah, I don't believe that either. And so, it's been interesting and it's been fulfilling on a number of levels, because I know that I've helped some people, but most importantly, I learned from the people who listen to me. They'll send me information, they'll correct me. I've learned from other people in the community. I'm like, okay, well, I believe this part, but we need to talk about that other part there. But it's about being open-minded, but not so open that your brain falls out, because it's important, again, for you to understand your power and wield that personal power to yield positive results. Positive results. You may have 10 people there, but one person's life you affected and impacted in a very positive way. Or you created a situation, or you said something that sparked their interest and made them want to go out and to do the research. Or have someone walk up to you and say, yeah, I used to question that in church as well. And so, going back to when I was in church as a teenager, one of the biggest challenges, every Sunday my mother would give me money and say, put this in church. So I would look at it and do the 10% calculation. And put in a little 10% until the Sunday school teacher decided to talk about tithing. Now, by this time, I have taken that comparative religion course, and I've talked to a number of people. And so I would say, well, the 10% that you're asking for, that goes towards the light bill and all of that stuff, right? The building fund. And they're like, no, that's God's money. God wants you to give 10%. It's written here. And I was like, well, I've talked to some Jewish people, and they say if you're not a Levitical priest, you cannot collect the tithe. So how does that work? And they're like, oh, we're part of the New Testament. And I'm like, oh, so we can throw all those commandments out, right? Didn't quite go over so well, so they let me play on my own. And so it's been exciting getting to this point. But, what I'm seeing happening across the country is absolutely amazing. And this is why I'm telling people the time is now. Because what you're seeing happening with these young people and their uprisings and their rebellion, look at these teachers across the country just walking out, afraid no more. Look at what the unions are doing. It's absolutely amazing. The working class, the proletariat, they are standing up as well. This is what we need. And this is something that I've tried to explain to people, for a long time, that in order for us to have a more effective, a deeper impact on what's happening in this country is going to have to be multiracial. And we're going to have to work together. So if 45 didn't do anything else, 45 found a way to bring us all together in protest against the policies and laws that he's trying to enact. Even though most of his executive orders have no validity whatsoever, but the ones that do have a great impact on the communities that he's targeting. And so, over the years, you have people like Muhammad Ali. They hated him until his Parkinson's, wouldn't allow him to speak anymore. They hated Martin Luther King until he was assassinated. They hated Malcolm X until he was assassinated, and many, many others. However, you have people in this country that will take their words, take quotes from these people that they hated then, but they love now, and they will take these quotes to try to contain and control Black and brown people in this country. And this is one of the fights that you see happening now, because we're like, no, you're taking it out of context. And one of the things that we talk about when we talk about white privilege is basically, yes, some of you may acknowledge that you have white privilege. However, are you willing to give up some of that comfort so that the rest of us will see justice? Now, that's a very real question. And that's something for people to think about. And it's a very real reality because I live it every day. I live it every day. I'm not happy when I walk into certain department stores and I know I have 10 security cameras on me and 2 security guards following me around, when I'm not going to steal anything. And even if I purchase something, I've had some cases whereas they would question, oh, so where did you get money for this? None of your business. Yeah, even most recently, when I was looking for a place, when I relocated back home, I went to see this townhouse, and the gentleman said he has some other places, so I wanted to see them. So he took me to this dilapidated house and said, well, this will be ready in a week. I'm like, this thing is filthy. How are you going to get this ready in a week? And he was like, oh, well, I have other places. And he was like, well, I got another townhouse, but I don't think you'll qualify for that. And I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, well, aren't you using Section 8? And I said, who said anything about Section 8? He was like, oh, I thought I heard you say that. And I said, I wish they would give me Section 8 and food stamps. I would accept it proudly, but they don't. But it was his attitude. And this is something that we deal with on a daily basis. I can give you so many examples, but, I try to let it go because it is triggering. And so it's not easy out here. Not even a little bit. And if you're politically, socially, culturally active, it's worse. That's one of the reasons why I've resisted being more public with what I do, is because I want to be able to walk down the street without getting spit on. I don't want anyone knocking on my door 1, 2 o'clock in the morning saying you're going to hell. But I still want to help the people. And so again, with you all, I challenge you, take 10% of whatever and donate it to the Black and brown organizations that are out there, because they definitely need your help. So again, if 45 didn't do anything, he's realized that we need each other, and he's brought us together, even if it's to oppose him. We got together, and hopefully we will have communications and dialogues, again, that will show what we have in common as opposed as in differences. So again, we are here to challenge you to think and live for yourself, not convert you.
You mentioned Moral Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Moral Mondays was founded by Dr. William Barber in North Carolina, and what happened is he was out there protesting against the injustices, against state-sanctioned violence. They would go to the state capitol, and they would have protests. They would have rallies throughout North Carolina, but bringing attention to what's happening in this country, what's happening with the working class, what's happening with poor people, and even what's happening with some people who don't even realize how they're being screwed over. So what happened is he called it Moral Mondays, but what he's doing is he's bringing back the Poor People's Campaign. So he's not the new MLK, he's Dr. William Barber. No one will ever be able to replace MLK or Malcolm X. Allow them to be themselves and allow him to be himself. But he understands the fundamental problems that are happening in this country with wealth inequality, with the racism, the homophobia, the transphobia, and he's created in which he's challenging the religious, the Christian, Black Christian community to come out and challenge what is wrong in this country. And interesting fact, when Martin Luther King was out here as an activist and bringing attention to these things, like I said, he wasn't popular. He wasn't even popular amongst Black churches. And a lot of people don't understand that. The reason why some of these churches allowed their churches to be used as a meeting space was because there were no public spaces available for Black people. And so there are, in some places, they have laws on the book. If you have more than 3 Black men in one spot, then they consider it suspicious. And so they opened up their churches so that Black folks can get together and learning and educating each other and planning. And that's what's happening now. What you're seeing is a resurgence. The civil rights movement has never ended, and the civil rights movement didn't begin with Martin Luther King. The civil rights movement began when the first slave ran away.
So I'm struggling with this concept of white privilege just a little bit. I have no doubts that, well, when police approach me, they approach me usually with courtesy and respect. It hasn't always been the case, but usually that's true. The problem I have with the term of white privilege is that I think that's the minimum that a police officer owes to anyone they approach, unless they see somebody in the midst of a crime. So in your talk, you asked if whites would be willing to give up something in order for people of color to enjoy more equality.
Well, everyone, because that includes poor whites as well.
Well, what do you think whites have to give up in order for people of color to enjoy more equality? What do we have to give up?
Well, in essence, basically a lot of the comfort that you've come to know. One of the arguments that I hear from white people when I talk about white supremacy, I'll hear that my grandfather and great-grandfather, my family worked hard to get the wealth that we acquired. Well, that's not actually true. My ancestors worked hard for you to get the wealth that you have. You know, people don't talk about what happened with the homesteading.
Worked hard for the wealth that they didn't earn.
Right. And so what happened is with the homesteading, a lot of white Americans were given the property free and clear. Well, some of the freed slaves after the emancipation, in many cases, they bought property of their own. Look at what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, when they had a coup d'etat. And they chased the Black people out of town, seized the property. Even to this day, when they find a deed written to a Black person, they're destroying it. And if you go back, we take it back all the way to FDR with the New Deal. In order for the New Deal to gain passage, what happened was the Democrats made certain demands, and FDR had to capitulate to those demands in order for the New Deal to be passed. And so before the New Deal, you would have one unemployed white person and one unemployed black person. After the New Deal, you would have one unemployed white person and two unemployed black people. And we won't even talk about how the way they set up Social Security was that people that worked in agriculture, agrarian professions, and domestic workers, they were not afforded Social Security either. A lot of that didn't change until the 60s. And even with that, even with the GI Bill, they denied black veterans access to the home loans, the school loans, and a number of things. And a lot of that came under the New Deal. So yes, some of the comfort and some of the privileges that have been extended because, I'm in STEM. And I've worked in a lot of different corporations. And I'll just say this. I was smarter than most of the people I worked for. But I was never afforded certain opportunities because I'm not white, hetero, cisgendered, wealthy, educated male. Did I answer your question?
Yep, you did.
Okay.
I'm interested in the challenge that you brought up for 10% donations to organizations for people of color. And I'm going to go back to medicine and figure out what those are because I do recognize that I've not been doing enough for that inclusion. But I was wondering if you had any organizations that you could recommend that do national work or even local work that you know of. I mean, I don't know, expect you to know something in Madison, but if you have recommendations, I'd like to hear them.
Okay, Black Youth Project. That is a project across the country. They have different chapters. When you turn 35, you've aged out of the group. So this is 35 and under, young black people out here organizing, are activists. And like I said, they have chapters all over the country. There's another group that I'm particularly fond of in Chicago. It's called Assata's Daughter. And it was named after Assata Shakur. But what happens is this is a mentorship program for young black women, and they just purchased a property in Chicago. They work with the community, they do a lot of outreach, and just some really positive things out there. Even with Black Lives Matter. Now, what I would say is I would prefer that you give it to the chapters. And I mean, you can send the money to the national organization because they do push the money down. But if you give it to the local chapters, then you'll be able to go in, meet the people, establish a relationship, let them find out what you do and your organization. And I'm more than positive that you can help them out in many ways because as quiet as it's kept, there are quite a few of us that are part of Black Lives Matter, that are agnostic or humanists or even atheists. And if you go back and look at the history of the civil rights movement, there are a lot of us there as well. If you look back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and you see some of the people that he surrounded himself with, Bayard Rustin, Asa Philip Randolph, James Baldwin, and a number of other people. I mean, if you even go back and look up Claudia Jones, there are a number of us that were out there. So there should be a book coming soon from Dr. Christopher Cameron talking specifically about Black freethinkers and Black atheists, because you can go all the way back in history. If you look up Hubert Henry Harrison, he was known as, Hubert Henry Harrison, he was way back then and during the time of the Renaissance. And we've been here before and after. It's just that in the black community, this is not something that we speak of. And Hubert Henry Harrison was known as, I can't remember, but you go back and you take a look at some of the people in history, you'd be surprised at who was a non-believer. I mean, Langston Hughes, especially looking at era of the Black Renaissance. And if you take a look at what happened over in Europe, you have the Negritude movement, which was in conjunction with the Black Renaissance. In a couple of months, I'll be in Amsterdam in an intensive school program for 2 weeks, and we will be talking about Black European and colonialism and what they went through. And I know one of the things that we're going to study is about the Holocaust and the black people who were persecuted in the Holocaust. So in turn, we will have to read about the children of the Rhineland. We will have to read about how some of the Afro-French people, how they were denied their citizenship, how some of that is still going on even to this day, and how they approach race in Europe. In Europe, if you don't talk about it, they don't want you talking about race or acknowledging it, so that makes it go away. And that's not true. So just find, the local Black Lives Matter chapter, and they can give you information to the local chapters of other groups that they're working with. So I would just use them as a resource. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very eye-opening to me personally. The question I have is, you were talking about diversity, and I was wondering, is there a way of distinguishing between useful critiquing and criticism, which comes out more of a negativism? Do you understand my question?
I understand what you're saying. There are some people in this world who only understand the negative. For the most part, you try to be diplomatic, talk it through, explain why you find something problematic. But if you have someone like the good old boys network, well, they think it's fine. So when the white women want to come in and have their feminism, they're pushing them away. When you have black and brown people like, oh, I want to be a part of this as well, they push them away. And so when you have movements and institutions that are built on cisgendered white men and their ideology and what they're thinking and whatever benefits them, you're going to receive resistance if you're not a part of that particular group of people. I've always advocated, then go start your own. But what's interesting about that one particular group of people is that in some cases, they would rather see the institution implode than to include other people. And they can do that. And the reason why they can do that is because they have the resources to rebuild it when you're gone, which is what they wanted in the first place.
Thank you.
All right.